Hi, I'm Priscilla.
And I'm Sydney.
And we are two best friends
who talk about everything
all the time.
So you can too.
I am a screenwriter and a Sagittarius, and I use she, her pronouns. I am also French Colombian and an immigrant.
And I am a Taurus and a performer, and I also use she, her pronouns. And I am a first generation Caribbean American.
And today we're going to be talking about relationships.
The romantic kind.
Yes. We asked our followers on Instagram, if you're not following us on Instagram yet, please do so, what we should talk about next. And the number one requested topic was indeed, can you talk about romantic relationships? So here we are. Both of us have very, very different histories romantically.
Yes, and very different anxieties surrounding different. You'll see it.
If you haven't subscribed to our channel, now is a good time to do so.
Please
for
do
more
so.
Content like this. Let's get into the video. Okay.
So I don't know if you
look so beautiful. You're so stunning. Oh my God. Like, look at this. Look at this. Okay.
delicious. This is a reshoot because we watched the first one and we were both like, oh no, we did not talk about what we wanted to talk about.
You're being so generous with me. I had a panic about our last video. Not because I don't think that we could release it. I think we could. Why do you think that people are so interested in hearing us specifically talk about relationships?
I've thought about this since they asked. I have no idea. I have no idea. This is a very difficult, hairy, kind of gray area in our lives. I would say on paper, Priscilla's had much more success than I have in this department.
Well, maybe we should give like our context a little bit.
I'm not a relationship guy. I grew up in a household with two working parents who had a functional marriage for, an extended period of time and then didn't anymore and went through a divorce when I was about 12. I think for a lot of people, they look to their families or they look to their parents for guidance or, what's the word? Like inspiration, whether it's like, I don't want to do that at all, or that's exactly what I want. I don't think they were my inspiration. I mean, I had two sets of grandparents who were married for over 40 years each, one 64 years, one, I don't know the exact number, but 40 something years. And I think I didn't necessarily want that. Just like I looked at my parents' divorce and I didn't go, oh my God, that was a fail. Like, I didn't have a reaction to that either.
I have been in a series of very serious relationships since I was 17. I'm now 29.
Since I was 17.
I've been single for a total of like 18 months, like total. The bulk of those 18 months have been 2020, which means that I spent little to no time being single whatsoever or with like someone on my phone.
Lucky bitch. Priscilla did a Q&A. You have to talk about it.
Right now?
Yeah.
This is the queerness bit.
Yeah.
Okay. A few months ago, I held a Q&A on my Instagram. I got 1,000 questions, and 100 of those, I'm not kidding, 100 of those were like, are you queer of any kind? Wink, wink, cross fingers, heart, 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 unicorn emojis.
Is the unicorn emoji queer?
It's something that we use a lot. I think it's like,
Respect.
there's a different like range of emojis that are used in the queer community. Anyway, I've been out since I was like 17 as bi, and I will post the way that I define my own bisexuality below. It gave me such pause because I answered that with such ease, and then the next day I woke up with this like immense vulnerability hangover, realizing like, holy shit, like is my queerness so obvious? Is it so apparent to everyone? Have I lost my appeal to the male gaze, right? And in the last few months, I think what I have been very open about, which is, tied to maybe why people want us to hear us talk about relationship, people are really interested in not only hearing us talk about relationship, but also like male gaze in particular, and like different gazes within relationships. What I've encountered the most in my own sexuality is not like, oh my God, do I like women? Do I like men? Do I like non-binary people? It's been like a toggling between gazes. Like it feels like, oh shit, do I like appeal to the patriarchy, or can I queer my life entirely? And does that completely dictate who I can be with? I think I was just so taught in my upbringing, this is something I'm really open about on Instagram, like I was so taught to like manipulate the male gaze and like gain power within it, like reinforce it, not reinforce it, maneuver it, that I have a hard time not centering it. I think this is the experience for most people in the world. It's so compulsory. Even in the making of this video, I'm like, which gaze do I appeal to?
Okay. Priscilla's relationship to gays is not my relationship to gays.
Yeah.
And that has everything to do with the color of my skin. And as a result, you know, something we've talked about is like, what are the actual gazes, right? Like, is straight, white, cis, het, straight, that... cis, het, sorry, I got distracted by it. There's a squirrel on
Literally passing through.
Hey.
Squirrel!
What kind of gazes are there? Is the cis het white male gaze the only gaze? And as a construct, because it's completely tied into, you know, a bunch of different isms and systems and things that we play into as a result of class hierarchy, etc. We all need to just like take the fucking cis het white male out of our heads and center our own gazes? Or are there multiple gazes? And, you know, is there a Western gaze? Is there I don't know, like, what is that? Because my experience of gaze is that I don't appeal to any gaze. As a result, I center my own. I always have.
You have always done that.
Yeah, because if I didn't, I would be like, not ugly, but I would be not appreciated, or I would think that I would have to change a lot of things about myself. Disclaimer, like, you can do whatever you want to yourself from a place of love, but if you're doing things to yourself to become more palatable version of yourself, to fit the gaze to suit the gaze, if you're prioritizing someone else's vision of you over yourself, I think that's where it's damaging. Like I like I said, I think I fell in line, and then I had an awakening, and I was like, I don't actually want to do this. I don't actually want to do this. I don't want to appeal to some general, like we keep saying, cis het white male gaze. It doesn't actually include me. To the average cis het white male, in my natural state, you know, whatever it is, I don't fit. And so I can't center that gaze, or I will spend my whole life chasing a standard that like means that I can't accept myself for what I am. And that was sort of a really heartbreaking thing to learn. I mean, I think my relationship history is sort of non-existent. I don't really have relationships. I take love as, no, I do though. I have, and I'm very grateful for it. It's been a wonderful experience. And yet I also know that like part of it is because I've understood that I am an acquired taste for a lot of people. Not just because of the way I look, but because of a bunch of other things just because. And I think that that's been hard, and also to understand and look back on my very early on relationship history and realize a lot of what I would deem the failures or the starts and stops there have a lot to do with my Blackness. And that's a really heartbreaking thing to have to carry, because the world sort of has this unspoken agreement to center the cis het white male gaze, even if you are not of that demographic. It's been a journey of like untangling myself from that, realizing that I was on the outside of it, feeling left out, but also not caring enough to assimilate that much in that way, and then rejecting it entirely, cutting all my relaxed hair off, growing out a full afro. Right now, if you look at my legs from far away, it looks like I'm wearing tights. Like, I'm not. I am not ashamed of my natural state, even if it doesn't appeal to blank. Because I wasn't going to appeal to blank anyway, because I'm Black, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know that's something that came up in the last live too, was just like what does that work look like? Like, I think I had asked you, like, what is one question that you had wished that people had asked you during the live, and something that came up is like, what was your journey of, how did you reclaim that? What does that actually tangibly look like?
I think it looks like a lot of, like, you know, sobbing. I talk about it a lot. I grew up in a lot of predominantly white spaces, outside of my home and my family and my neighborhood. Like, the school that I went to, I was one of a very small group of Black people and people of color. Part of that work was really like being curious about what I actually like about myself. Not even just from like an attractiveness standpoint, but from like a package standpoint. Like, what do you like about yourself? That was like a very hard question for me to answer for a very long time. And now I could rattle off like 25 things that I like about myself that are for me, not I like about myself in terms of other people. Not this is something I like about myself that I hope someone else will also like. Like, I was already gonna weed out people by being Black. And then on top of that, you have to learn that that's not, you have to undo that. You have to undo your own internalized shit and realize like, that's not a bad thing. But again, it's a lot of sobbing. It's a lot of like, oh my God, I wish I were white and tall and blonde, and skinny, not because whatever skinny means, but not because I genuinely hate what I see when I look in the mirror, but because that would make me more appealing to the gaze that we all seem to center. I think about my niece growing up in a time where she does have a Black Disney princess. And like, yes, I have issues with the fact that Tiana does spend most of the movie as a frog, but she has a Black Disney princess. I will never forget, like, we were listing, I don't know what grade we were in. We were listing, you know, what princess do you identify with, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't have one. And somebody was like, well, you could be Nala. And I was like, you mean the cartoon lion? Why, because Africa? You know, like, it's internalized shit like that. Like, to not have references for yourself, this is why we do what we do in our fields. Like, to not have representation, to not focus on inclusion means that little girls that look like me grow up with a completely skewed sense of self. And then they grow up under the guise of, okay, cishet white male gaze is what everyone has again, the unspoken agreement that everyone has just like agreed to uphold, whether knowingly or not. And you don't fit in with that. So you have to find your own way, or you have to find a way to fit in with that. I'm still doing the work, obviously, by evidence of how hard it is to talk about. I'm still doing it, but it's a combination of faking it till you make it, and really just being like, you see that? You see that in the mirror right there? This is a new part of it for me, especially relationship-wise, is like accepting that I might actually be able to get what I want. I might be entitled to whomever and whatever I want.
I really have been thinking about this since we last filmed, in terms of like getting what we want in relationships. I don't really know what I want in a relationship, and we've been trying to like figure this out as friends, you know? It's been so hard for me to be like, yes, let me tell you what I want. I don't know. Part of that is like my sexuality. Part of that is growing up in a multilingual, multicultural, international household. What I internalized as a child was not only, it's hard for you. It's going to be hard for you based on all the assets that you bring to the table. As my mother literally said that to me on the phone the other day, where I was telling my mom about this. My mom was like, it's hard for girls like you. When your own mother thinks that.
See, I took pride in that. My parents would tell me the same thing, and I was like, good.
I think I also internalized like being difficult. Like,
yeah, like it made you hard to love as opposed to
like
valuable.
Like, I think for my brothers it manifested in a different way. I think my brothers like were told you are lovable no matter what. There was a more rigid conditionality to the way that I was taught to be consumed, really. And so, okay, so this means that I have a right to want what I want in every other facet of my life. This requires too much. So It's actually impossible. It's real. Like, I really realized that since we last filmed, I was like, oh, I just believe this is impossible.
It's funny. I know that from the way that we talk, from the way that my dear friend talks about her prospects. I know that. I think that's very site specific to the straight males that you either are attracted to or decide to date. I think anybody else, and I mean anybody else, you know, for women or somebody who's non-binary, like, you don't have to worry about that in that way.
No, yeah, I do have like a level of discernment. We were talking about this last night. Like, there's like a level of discernment in with other queer folks, I'll say.
Yeah.
That just goes out the window the moment I'm dealing with like a cishet dude.
Like, you know too much. you know a lot. You know more about straight men than I ever will.
So I grew up in a house full of dudes. Like, it was a house of men made for men to be conquered by men.
Except for Martin.
Except for
Shout
my
out
mom.
Martin!
I venture to say that, like, based on sort of our arrangement, I grew up in this kind of like non-traditional household. My dad had a bigger hand in raising me, and also my dad was a type of public figure. So there was like my dad, and then there was like the idea of my dad. And I think I was just so exposed to this particular brand of machismo. I like assume that it is true of all men. All men act this way, and I know you so well. And I will thus try and get ahead of it. And like,
I think I have a little bit of that, but I think it's not just, I like assume it in everyone. I assume that everyone is like my parents. And we won't go into specifics about that because they will watch this, but I do assume that everyone is like my parents.
well, when it comes to gays, I think I have so much compassion for the way that I was raised, understanding all of its flaws. Like, I really was just given the tools that I needed in order to like navigate and survive the world. Like, my dad was just so concerned with like us having such a better life than he was given. And as a result, like, really taught us all the tools that he had to learn along the way to navigate this world. And all of it centered like how to retain and gain power. I was taught to center the male gaze, not just to like, not to succumb to it, but rather to like learn how to properly navigate it. The other side of that coin is that like, I'm entirely dependent on it to know, to gauge myself. Syd pointed this out the other day, like sometimes when I talk, I get so self-conscious when this has shifted in the last year. Before this year, because my world is shifting, like I was so proud to describe the way that I was raised, and now I feel so self-conscious of it, because I'm like, oh my God, like I was just like so vehemently raised in sort of like patriarchal terrorist household, and I know how to play within it very well.
Thank you, Lutsi Segu, for that phrase.
1000%. So I feel almost embarrassed by how competitive I am and how dominant I want to be. It's like all of the rules of me apply up until romance. I just don't think I was like taught how to, I don't think I know how to place, a part of me just goes, that's just gonna happen the way it needs to happen. Like, I don't know, which is so crazy because I'm in no way, shape or form like this in any other aspect of my life.
No.
So I just don't think I have a lot of faith that it's gonna pan out. And I think as a kid, I hadn't even decided that.
Which is interesting because your parents are still married.
Yes, but I don't want their marriage.
No, of course. I'm somebody whose parents' marriage ruptured.
And you...
And
yeah.
I held on to the idea of partnership for a really long time. And then I separated myself from it a little bit. Like, I definitely... We've talked about this. Like, I planned my wedding. When I was 16 years old, I sat my father down at a diner and I was like, you will be wearing white linen. We will take pictures at sunset. There will be gold flatware. It will be in the south of France. It will be in a castle on the beach. That was like, getting married was an important thing to me. Now I feel differently because I've understood marriage as a tool of capitalism. If you get married, do you think? If that's what you want in your life, do you think? For me personally, because I have trust issues and because I want partnership. I don't want to, I know that sometimes marriage and partnership are synonymous, but sometimes they are not. Who knows, maybe I'll fall in love And somebody will convince me to sign that paper because, you know, it's their mother has always wanted them to get legally married. But like for right now, I want somebody to be with me, wake up every day and choose me because they have the freedom to leave at any time, not because there's a legal process involved, a very expensive legal process involved to separate. I think I definitely got love and codependence mixed, and understanding that like you are actually the master of your own destiny when it comes to partnership. And like I said, like understanding you can want things, understanding that you can have certain things that you will not compromise.
Compromise? What is compromising? Compromising for what? Compromising for what reason? To compromise? For what? To compromise. What is compromise?
If a man came into your life, wouldn't you want to compromise?
Stupid.
And I think for a really long time, I was very ashamed of my own track record. I was ashamed to say that like no one's ever had the pleasure of being my boyfriend. Not ashamed to say that anymore. Because I've had a really good time with some really wonderful people, and you have all different walks of life. And I feel privileged to have learned what I've learned. I don't really believe that if a relationship doesn't work out, it's a failure. Like I think that's another very capitalist, marriage-centric idea that like if you break up, you failed, as opposed to like if you break up or if you separate, it's because that's just like on your journey to actually being loved. Like I love being single, let me tell you. Right now, like I live to be single. Your company better be better than mine because I fucking love being by myself.
I had to learn. Oh my God, I had to learn. Oh my God, I had to learn.
I sort of want to go like 0 to life partner. Like either we're friends or we're gonna have babies. I don't want a boyfriend.
Yeah, but this is so crazy because like I don't know. This is the funny thing because the other thing that I left thinking about the last time we talked about this is just like we have all of these. I have this thought about who I am and how I show up, and then my actions in relationships, and only in relationships, are actually very different. Like you say things like that, right? And then I'm the one who literally will meet someone and be like,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, if they asked me to marry them tomorrow, if we would like elope tomorrow,
Priscilla has a part of her that would want to experience an arranged marriage.
Oh my God, how? Oh my God, if I don't have to think about any of this other shit, like I could just focus on my career and someone else is figuring that out. That would be amazing. That would be lit. Think about it all the time. Think about it all the time.
No.
Yeah, like there are people. I don't know. There are just people that I meet that immediately like I'm like I could see myself like marrying you tomorrow and then just like taking it from there. Just like, how romantic. But you would never do that, even though you're the one who's like, I want a life partner, I don't want a boyfriend.
Right, but I want very specific things. So that's been the journey of this year for me, is coming up with non-negotiables. Again, not being afraid to want things, meaning not being afraid that like, there are certain things that you can't come over here with some shit. Don't come over here with some shit. Okay, here are my 5. You have to want to be a parent. No matter what happens in terms of my interpersonal, romantic, etc. relationships, I'm gonna have babies. If it's by myself, if it's with a friend, like I'm gonna have babies. Like my family and I have a complicated relationship. We have a complicated family, but I have been committed to making whoever's in my life a part of that family. That's very important to me. You have to have a path. Like you have to have a very clear, you have to have something that lights you up, that you're getting up every day to do, that you're like driven and envisioning and actively working towards, because I do. I cannot be your whole life. I will disappoint you. I have a path. I have a bunch of things that I'd like to get done in this life. And I'm really lucky that I was born into the family that I was born into, because I actually have the opportunity to do them. And I'm going to take full advantage of that. You have to have some sort of spiritual grounding. Doesn't mean it has to be God. It just has to be it just means you have to believe in something bigger than yourself. Because I think that's a very dangerous way to go through life if you only believe in the power of you. Just as long as it's not, you know, a cult. You have to, okay, this is something that we've talked about. I'm the kind of person who for you to have any chance of coming over here, I have, as if I'm an island, but I am an island. I am an island. If you want a chance to land on the island, I have to salivate at you. Whether, like, I have to be so deeply attracted to you on a chemical molecule level. It's not always centered around the way that you physically look, but I do have to be deeply attracted to you, whatever that means. That's 4. Parent, be driven, spirituality. Oh, the most important one. Unconditional love is a very new concept for me. It's very difficult for me to understand. And I have a lot of trust things around it. Again, because historically I have mixed up love and codependency. And so there's some aspects of unconditional love that I'm still learning. And I need you, whoever you are, to know how to do that. Somebody who's just not afraid to love every version of me, because I'm so afraid that doesn't exist. Because I'm still learning how to love every version of myself. Those are my 5. Some people really believe in, like, there's one person out there for you. I don't believe that. I believe that there's many. And the probability of you meeting a couple is medium to low. So that's why it always feels like there aren't that many.
So how did you come up with that list? Like, what in Sydney's Island were you like, this is the way I'm going to decipher these things?
I was scared to. Because I was scared to want things. And then I was like, what do you act like in the world where you actually, so I think both of us have had moments in our lives where we're like, I'm going to be single forever. I'm just going to be the
moment right now.
Right. We'll get into that. I'm going to be the cool auntie that has a brilliant career, travels, does whatever she wants, maybe has children, maybe doesn't, and never sticks in one place, is untethered. But I realized that for me, that was a complete lack of faith in
humanity.
No, not in humanity, but for me specifically in men. As a cishet woman. That's me convincing myself of something so that I don't get hurt. That's me convincing myself of something so I don't have to actually surrender to the experience of living in the gray area of, I don't know when this is happening, I don't know what's happening, I don't know if it's happening, but here we are.
Something that you're also very good at is like not practicing something that you wouldn't want practiced on you. Like,
yes.
You're one of the best people who upholds that practice that I know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you remind me of that every time.
Yeah, because because that's the only reference I have. I've never had a boyfriend. I've never had a long-term partner of any kind. Like, I also had to put it in terms of, like, what do I need? How would it be if somebody loved me? Meaning, what in me will make someone love me?
This is something that I think about all the time, especially lately. Like, I talk about on my page about the privilege of like malleable identity, and how that needs to be handled responsibly at all times, right? Like, I'm truly perceived differently wherever I go, depending on what performance I choose to put on. Like, sure. That is a privilege that I have. I realize that is something that I have always done in my performance to men, right? It's like, or any partner for that matter. I mean, I think, again, I've just had more discernment with women and non-binary folks, but like,
I think, again, something we talked about in our live, not to cut you off, but like, is because you were raised to exchange and manipulate power, right?
Mm-hmm. So I think the loss of gaze feels very tangibly, and it feels like a loss of power. It feels like in that energy exchange I've lost the power.
Like, if you were you, would you choose you? If you
I
weren't
think I'm
you?
lit. I think I'm lit. This is just it's so interesting and fascinating because I think the two things that I've tried to shapeshift are size and queerness, right? And like this is something we had on the last time, but like I'm now only coming to a place of like really it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. And obviously like sexuality is fluid and it's a spectrum and it changes forevermore, right? Like you don't land somewhere and then stay there forever, right? Like bisexuality isn't 50-50. It's this like gorgeous, beautiful thing. But like I think I have tried to also like compartmentalize my own sexuality out of fear of it and also out of experiencing like my own internalized biphobia and the biphobia that I have received from every partner I've been with, regardless of gender. I think understanding queerness is like a holistic experience that is like still there always, regardless of who I'm dating, is a new thought for me. And that feels like
because you're a patriarchal terrorist.
Oh my God.
Do you like being a girlfriend?
No.
No.
No, and I'm always just like, it's such a weird thing that I've done because I rebel. It's like, I'm such a structure fiend. I am very structured and I'm like a very type A person. And there are some structures that I follow to a T because I'm a disgusting upholder. But there are certain structures that I only need in place in order to rebel against them. Like had I gone to like Sarah Lawrence, for example, where you like make your own schedule, I would have failed. I would have failed. In college, if I took 2 classes per semester, I would get like C's. If I take 4, I get straight A's. I need structure to either thrive within it or completely blow it up. I don't know how to not, and I think I've used my relationships as like a kind of structure. You know, I'm never more rebellious than when I am in a relationship. I don't think I love being a girlfriend. I think I just like the structure that relationships provide. Not to diminish the very real love that I've experienced in all of these relationships.
Like seeing relationships as a structure as opposed is wild.
But they are.
No, 100%. But what's interesting to me is that it's not necessarily a structure that you build together. It's a structure for you. Seeing it as like a structure for you to thrive in, as opposed to like, I'm going to put this brick right here, or what are you building over there?
Yeah. I've also been in a relationship, like my longest relationship was like a triple Capricorn. Like,
what does that mean, Priscilla? What's a triple Capricorn mean for those people who don't?
It's just like the most regimented human on the planet. Like
Capricorn is an earth sign.
Taurus is an earth sign, but y'all are like the hedonist of the zodiac. A Capricorn is not. A Capricorn is like Pentacles, right? It's like, It's just like structure and money.
And to be fair to the Taurians out there, I wouldn't necessarily would say that we're the hedonist in terms of like, we like to just like take our tops off and like, I would say we are like pleasure seeking at all times.
Yeah, I think that like luxuriating is something that I think of you often.
Right, but like my version of luxuriating sometimes is literally like sitting in bed on FaceTime with Priscilla at 12 a.m. like eating olives. Like she's like, you're so gross. And I'm like, have you ever had like olives are?
Right, whereas like, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna air all his business, but amazing person. I truly thought I was going to end up with him. So it's not to diminish my love for him or our relationship, but no.
Imagine.
What?
Imagine we just used this hour to be like, so then there was this guy named, then there was this girl and her name was, and she was just disgusting.
He's a tremendous human, but yeah, he brought his own. I mean, in contrast to him, I felt like a tornado, and like
right, he like came with blueprints, and you were like,
and yes, the entire time. It doesn't help that like I was like an active addiction when we started dating, and so that clearly did shift a lot of things. Like when we first started dating, I felt like I needed to be saved, and he really was willing to play that role. So we both played that role for one another.
Question for you, because let me put it to you this way, because I think every time I talk about it, it's funny. I've talked about my list of non-negotiables to Priscilla many times, and every time she like her butthole like disappears. I'm sorry that I talk about buttholes a lot, but just here we are. This is a lovely human who makes lists for fun, makes lists and charts all the time. Like had an actual like like an almost actual orgasm today when her planner came. I came over and she was like, look at my planner! And I was like, yes, it's me.
So excited.
She was so excited. And like, people are like this. If I frame it for you as such, this is the craziest thing I've ever asked. Not at all true. If I frame it for you as like, we're in a world like that movie Ex Machina or like Gattaca, and you're, oh my God, the squirrel's back.
Squirrel!
A scientist is standing in front of you and says, okay, now design your partner. That scares you.
Yeah, that feels so disingenuous.
Okay, so my second question, will go short. Because I think that's how you see the list of non-negotiables, as this like scientific thing that says, you know, when they talked about like how in the future we're gonna be able to like pick what our babies look like that feels so gross to me. Like I don't wanna pick that my baby has green eyes, and I don't wanna pick anything. I wanna be pleasantly surprised at what comes out of my body.
I'm gonna be pleasantly surprised at what comes out of my body.
Gross.
I make lists about everything.
Why?
Nothing is forced. It's all things that I'm trying to like brain dump.
Now, same scientists asks you to design your career.
Yeah. So here I'll say like sort of like on a somatic level, what it feels like. When I make those lists, it's not things that I'm like thinking up. It's like it's a literal brain dump. It's like these are the things that I've been holding on to that need accomplishing. That's what to-do lists feel like to me. It's like I need to finish that script, and like when I feel a desire, it builds enough that it becomes a part of my to-do list rather than a goal. Like when I see things that I want, truly, when I see things that I want, like when Phoebe Waller-Bridge came around, I was like, I think about her long enough that it no longer feels like this dream. It manifests itself. It starts to feel like this thing I need to get out. So now I'm like, okay, I need to write this thing and I need to write that thing. And quite literally the steps towards that now goal become tangible, but they're not things I'm thinking up on my own. When I think about like making lists about partners, it feels like I'm pulling from thin air. It's not a brain dump. It feels like, oh, well, nothing, no other list in my life feels that way. When I write something down, it's because it's like a burning desire that I need to get out.
I look at a to-do list and I go, I'm never gonna get that done.
Right, whereas I look at the to-do list and I'm like, okay, the anxiety of not getting it done is so bad.
But I think it's flipped romantically. I think for you, when you look at, if you made a list of non-negotiables, you would go, that doesn't exist, and I can't live in a world where that doesn't exist.
I just don't see, it's so out of my control too, that it just feels like that's not something that I can get up and do today. Whereas like every other to-do list that I have, I'm just chipping away at the thing.
But I think again, because we talked about this, I think you don't center yourself in that way. I think because it's like, I can't ask for those things of someone else. I can't expect the universe to send me that, as opposed to like, what do you need?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
There's something
I hate this conversation.
I know. How do you get to your island as a friend?
Can we pause filming so that we can start this new?
Stay tuned for part 2. We're coming out shortly.